Hi, and welcome to Journey Forward with Jory Rose, where you will gain insights, tools, and inspiration to get unstuck and live your best life. Jory is a licensed marriage and family therapist with a passion for helping people cultivate awareness and authenticity so they can show up fully in all aspects of their life. And now, here's Jory.
Hi, and welcome back to Journey Forward with Jory Rose. I am so excited today to have clearly an old friend, Cory Muscara, on the show today. And I'm laughing why I say we're an old friend. Cory, please tell us the hysterical story of when I reached out to you recently.
Well, everyone, Jory reached out to me a number of months ago. I think it was on Instagram.
It was on Instagram.
It was on Instagram. And
I've been following your success for years. I'm like, wow, look at this amazing guy doing this amazing mindfulness work. I'm so in awe.
Makes it even funnier. And reached out to me and was more or less like, hey, my name's Jory. I run this podcast and I was wondering if you'd like to be a guest on it. And it was like really humble and sincere and it was long. And then I basically just responded as like, yeah, Jory, like we're friends. Not all right, I didn't say that. But it was like, you clearly don't remember me.
Oh my gosh, Cory, I was so embarrassed. Yeah. I didn't remember you. And how could I not remember? Our names are like so similar. Like
we even connected over that. You don't even remember that. It was like, oh, it's Jory and Cory. So for those that are confused right now,
as Jory confused as I was.
We went on a retreat when we were both kind of like at the beginnings of our mindfulness journey at Mount Madonna with John Kabat-Zinn and Saki Santarelli back in like 2011, 2012. And there's 150 people in that room.
Yes.
But we were sitting
oh my gosh,
right next to each other.
The story gets more embarrassing for me.
There were multiple times where we went shoulder to shoulder, like talking and conversing. But Jory didn't remember any of it. I did.
Which is the most embarrassing thing because I have a really good memory. And you know what? It was, I just must have been so present that I wasn't, I don't even have a good excuse. Needless to say, I was totally horrified that I did not remember and was laughing at your dry sense of humor around it. I think you had a good time poking fun at my lack of memory.
I did. It was really, really fun for me.
But that was the beginning of both of our mindfulness journeys. That was my first. I did a training prior to that with Mindful Schools, but that was my first retreat. And so I didn't even introduce you. I mean, I just went right into our funny story. So Cory, before we talk about our journeys and how they have crossed paths, just please introduce yourself.
Yeah, well,
officially.
Hey everyone, my name's Cory Muscara. For the last 7-8 years, I've been running the Long Island Center for Mindfulness, which is where most of my work started, doing workshops and retreats. And things have spread in the last, I'd say, 4 or 5 years. Now I do a lot of speaking around the world to corporations, school systems, healthcare systems. And recently authored my first book,
Yay!
Stop Missing Your Life, How to Be Deeply Present in an Unpresent World. And
how to remember the people sitting next to you and not forget that they're there.
Stop missing your life, how to be friends with Cory and remember your friends.
Well, we're friends now, so it's all good.
We are, and it feels good.
So how did you get started in mindfulness and meditation? What was it that brought you to this practice?
Yeah, I have a bit of an unusual path. I think probably most people say that about their paths into this, but mine was for no noble reason. I was trying to impress a girl. I had a hippie girlfriend in college. She was into meditation. I wanted her to think I was cool, so I started meditating. And
okay, can we just pause there and say, number one, what a guy to want to impress a girl through meditation. That would have gotten my attention for sure, because to have an aware man, like that really seems like a diamond in the rough.
Yeah, well, thanks.
Did it work?
No, she broke up with me 2 weeks later.
Oh no. Who's laughing last now, right?
Yeah, she played a big role in my journey. I reached out to her about 1.5 years ago and told her all of this, and because she didn't know any of this. She didn't know I was doing it because I was trying to impress her. But it was really interesting because I'd say the first 8 months of my mindfulness journey, maybe the first year, was like there was a sincere interest in all of this, but also in the back of my head, because I was in college, I was like 19, 20.
Yeah.
There was also this sense of like wanting her to like look what I'm doing and like, look, I'm the guy that's in a meditation now, and thinking that would somehow win her back. And so I often talk about the first year of my meditation journey as being fueled mostly by ego, which is, there's a ton of irony there.
I was just going to say, isn't that kind of inherently take you out of the intention of meditation?
It does and it doesn't. So I mean, yes, the obvious is that it does. Where it gets more nuanced in my view is that we all have things that kind of pull us into the practice and serve as the fuel for the practice before there's a deeper intrinsic motivation and inspiration. Sure. And for some of us, it's, I want to improve my relationship, which could be seen as like an external thing.
Sure.
For others, want to be more productive. For me, I wanted to impress a girl. And I think a lot of times early on, we see these motivations and quickly try to quell them or see them as antithetical to the practice, which in some ways they are. And I also kind of bow to that younger version of myself that it was a part of my humanness to be exploring it for that reason. And then the beauty of the practice is that once you engage in it, it sort of works through you in a very pure way, and
it almost feels,
the motivation.
Yeah, it's like there's many doors into the same room. Yes. Whatever brings you into the room, you're then in the room.
Yes. Yeah. And once I got into the room, I didn't need anyone to keep me there. So, I started meditating. I had these benefits of improved sleep, focus, like some good things happened that were simultaneously pulling me on this path alongside like the ego intention. And my father, who's a physician on Long Island, he was getting frustrated with the direction that healthcare was going in, and was simultaneously exploring other ways to promote health and well-being. So he was getting into mindfulness meditation and positive psychology. And I, right before I came home for spring break one summer to tell him I'd been meditating, I had this, or spring break one spring, I had this experience where I went to the New York Stock Exchange to meet with some bigwig hedge fund manager because I was an economics major. Okay. And this guy, who was like a billionaire, gave this 2-hour PowerPoint presentation to all of us. And I just felt like it sucked my soul out of my body. And I was just uninspired, lifeless, bored. And there was this visceral repulsion. And I have no idea what's going on in his life. Like, the guy could be happy as a pickle. If pickles are happy, could have just been having a bad day.
Or content as a pickle.
Or content. Yeah. But for whatever reason, had that experience and just quickly realized like, that is not what I want. And what is it that I want? And the thing that kept coming up was fulfillment. And so that became like the centerpiece of what I was interested in. And a whole series of events unfolded. Went home, told my parents about this. My dad said he was getting into this stuff as well.
Gave me fully supported.
I was very supported. And it's where any sort of like, I don't know if you'd want to call it success or not, but often, because I got into this all at a very early age. And so, in almost any retreat I went on, I was the youngest by 10 or 20 years. And there was always, kind of this thing of like, wow, like good for you for like getting into it so early. Yeah. And as if I had something to do with it. And sure, we can make the argument that maybe I did, but overall, like I had a ton of supports along this journey. One, for whatever reasons, my childhood prepared my mind to be at that point where the idea of mindfulness came up and I was interested in it. And then this girl came along and she was doing it, and that inspired me to go deeper into it. And then I brought it to my parents and said I was interested in it. And instead of them saying, well, good on you, but go get a job, they said, actually, like, if you want to explore this, you can. And so just everything kind of unfolded in a way that it paved a path for me that I can hardly take any credit for.
Did you feel like you were being propelled down this path?
Yeah.
Like almost, it was just, I don't know. And I say that kind of in a self-serving way of how I felt with my journey with this. It just felt like this exposure presented itself to me, and then I was just drawn.
Yeah.
It was a very conscious choice, but yet it was this unconscious propelling that I just felt like I was being pulled, and I had to continue to honor what I was feeling of, let's deepen this exploration.
Yes. Yeah. I've reflected on that question in the past of, does it feel like a calling to be doing what I'm doing? Do I feel like I'm pulled into it? And I don't actually resonate with either of those. I've felt pulled into a lot of different things in my life. There was just something about mindfulness that felt familiar. There was something about talking about it that for some reason came very easily to me. There's a ton of things that don't come easily to me, but the language of it and presenting it and teaching it was very intuitive. And the desire to go deeper into it and learn about it and just feel like this is important. This is pointing to something really, really important. That just hit me like a ton of bricks. And so, I guess there was some force that was pulling me into it. And
so what did you do next? How did you delve deeper?
Yeah, well, so I started going on retreats. The retreat we went on was, I think, during my senior year of college.
See, that's probably why I didn't notice you. You were a little young for me to be talking to.
Yeah. Maybe if I was a little older. So I was the youngest in that room by at least 15 years, I remember.
Yeah.
And which was exciting.
I don't know that I'm that much older than you.
Yeah. Okay. No, sorry.
We'll bridge it somewhere in the middle.
Let's say 10, 8. So that was the second retreat I had been on. I started doing my mindfulness-based stress reduction training while I was in college, and also getting trained as a health coach at Duke Integrated Medicine. So I was leaving campus to go to all these other institutions to start getting trained. It was just very clear, like, this is what I wanted to pursue. And when I graduated college, I took some time to just like take stock of where I'm at and what do I want to do with all of this. And as there really was an intrinsic draw to the practice and exploring it and the depth of it and the science behind it. And I was developing a love for it, but there was still something like in the back of my head that the question that kept coming up was, if nobody knew that I was doing this meditation thing, like, would I still be doing it? And I didn't have a clear answer to that. I think there was a lot wrapped up in the identity of being the meditation person. And I really liked that identity. And there was a lot of happiness that was coming from holding on to that identity. And it was confusing to me of like, is the happiness I'm experiencing from this coming from the practice itself? Or is it coming from me enjoying the identity of being the one that does this practice?
What did the identity offer to you?
In college, it was like a currency, right? I was the guy I was the social chair of my fraternity, and I was also the meditation guy. And like, people would talk about that, and it was cool. And it was
different. It was probably unique at that time.
It was unique. It was definitely unique. And I've always liked, my ego has always liked standing out. I would, like, when I was at 5 years old, I always wanted to be the line leader in kindergarten. So there's just something about my ego structure that has moved, like, has been pulled toward like leadership type stuff. And
I was just going to say, maybe it's not so much as standing out as it is to be in service and to lead.
Yeah, maybe I'll take the negative side, which is just like, I want people to like me.
Yeah.
And so I've noticed that theme my whole life. And I just saw it coming up around this practice, which was like, I knew what it was pointing to, like the depth of what it was pointing to. And I didn't know if I was actually touching into it. So I did what most college grads do. I went over and lived as a monk in Burma. So I decided to do a 6-month silent Vipassana retreat where we just meditated every day, 14 hours a day from 3 a.m. till about 9:30 p.m. And
3 a.m. is when it would start, huh?
Yeah. Of all the monasteries I've been to or I've heard of, that's still the earliest I've seen so far. Most are like 4:35. For whatever reason, starts at 3. And then,
So 6 whole months in silence.
yeah. I mean, we talk to our teacher once every like 3 or 4 days for a few minutes.
So I did a 5-day
Yeah.
silent
Which
with
is
Bob
intense.
Stahl
Oh, Bob's
about
great.
3 months after our retreat.
Cool.
And I thought, if I can not talk for 5 days, anyone can. I started talking very young, and I never have shut up since. So it's probably why I have a podcast, because no one can tell me to stop talking. But it was an amazing experience to watch the wave and the journey of, oh, this feels like peace. This is like a vacation of not having to listen to anybody, not having to talk. And then it was, oh my God, what the hell am I doing here? And then it was that madness, and then I settled in, and then it was time to leave. So that was only in 5 days. So I could imagine within 6 months, you probably go through that cycle a billion times.
Yes.
How did you, or did you, or was it, how did you settle into that?
Well, there's different arcs that it takes throughout the retreat. There are these mini cycles that it has, and then there's a much larger cycle. And I'm kind of convinced that any retreat you go on is going to follow a similar macro cycle, which is like the first, let's say it's a week-long retreat. The first couple of days, you're going to resist it, and it's going to be painful, and you're going to hate it. Then you'll start to get a little bit of concentration, and you'll start to settle a bit. Then you'll go a little deeper, and there'll be like, have an existential crisis, some form of that, and then start to integrate it and then transition them. And so like and that will just take place like often over a longer period. If it's a month, 3 months, 6 months, the layers of settling in, kind of happen in somewhat in a predictable way. But then within that arc, there are other layers. So for me, the first week of that 6-month retreat was just absolute hell. A lot of physical pain, and a lot of it's because it's not as cushy as it is over here in the States when you go on retreats, and they, you get lots of nice pillows if you want them. You can sit in a chair. There you get a little bamboo mat and these really flat cushions, and I can't sit cross-legged. I mean, I can. It's just really uncomfortable for me. My feet fall asleep, just very tight hips. And so it took a while for me to find a sitting posture that worked, and my body just like blew up in physical pain. It felt like my back was on fire. And anytime I take a deep breath, the pain would radiate around to my gut, and it just felt like I was being cattle prodded. All over my body.
That just comes from sitting.
Yeah, the stillness, and I mean the austerity of it. Like the mattresses were so thin you could squeeze them between your fingers and feel the bone in your finger. So there's that's also lending itself to the pain that can arise. But yeah, when you can't turn your attention away from your sensory experience, a lot of things that have been lingering in the background come to the surface, as you know, and it's just kind of exacerbated. So I went through that cycle, saw that I could kind of modulate the amount of suffering that I was going through with how I was relating to the thoughts. So it was my first exposure to primary versus secondary pain. And the primary pain was the physical pain, which is like, couldn't do anything about. As long as I was going to be there, it was going to be there. The secondary pain were the thoughts and the emotions that I was caking on top of it. And those thoughts were things like, dude, there's no way you're going to be able to do 6 months of this. Like, what's wrong with your body? Nobody else is having this much struggle. It's like, why you should go Thich Nhat Hanh's monastery is a lot more soft and gentle. And just all of that created anger, sadness, fear, loneliness. And then the real kick in the ass that I got to see was that those thoughts would trigger the emotions. And then I could see the emotions actually making the physical pain worse. And so when you meditate that intensively, your mind just becomes like a microscope, and you just see the relationship of everything. And it was this insidious mental loop. It's just like, all right, the pain comes up, the thoughts that hate the pain come up, those thoughts trigger emotions, and the emotions trigger the physical pain. And
so I love that you just described that, because that's actually a framework that I draw out for my clients, where I do a cycle. And the first step in that framework that I do is the thoughts. And I always say that the thoughts, emotions, sensations are so interchangeably, they happen so quickly. You can even interchange the order in which it shows up. But what I experience with a lot of my clients is that thought arises, and then they get, a sensation in their body. It's like that fight, flight, freeze response produces a physiological response. And then there's the emotional response from the sensation of the, the anxiety, the worry, the fear that accompanies that, which then goes to reaction.
Mm-hmm.
The reaction is the judgment, the why. Why is this happening? It's the wanting to deny, wanting to ignore, wanting to resist, which that reaction only makes a thought bigger, which makes the sensation stronger, which makes the emotion bigger. And it's like you just said, like, it's exactly what I draw out for my clients.
Yeah.
And,
Awesome.
The key to me is then, rather than go from the, to the reaction place, it's how do I respond to it? And that's, to me, the mindfulness practice, right? It's all the tools of breathing and awareness and self-compassion and loving kindness and being present. And it is, but I love that you said that same thing, because this is what happens. This is the working of the mind. And without awareness, we get stuck in that. And it's like, life sucks. Well, and you're human. And what are you doing to contribute to what's shitty right now?
Yes, exactly.
Be blunt about it. It's
totally. And the one thing I'll add for those that might be listening and like they've seen this mental loop come up, and a lot of times when we see it, we do have some space to most of the time I'd say to like intervene and then maybe start to shift the thoughts, which then can shift the emotions and then can shift the secondary suffering. But there's also something profound in actually being able to sit back and just watch the mind and the body playing out this loop, right? So the first stages of the relief I felt in relationship to this pain was just this part of me that was like, oh wow, look at this physical pain. It triggers these thoughts of like, I hate this. What's wrong with your body? You got to get out of here. It's triggering these emotions and I just watching that, and it was the same thoughts, it was the same emotions, the same physical pain, but there was a different relationship to it in being able to be aware of it. And I think a lot of times in the early stages of this stuff, when we're breaking stuck patterns that they're so deeply conditioned, when we see them, there's a very knee-jerk response to make it wrong and then to quickly get away from it. Yeah. And I think, and you mentioned loving kindness, I think bringing in some loving kindness there and just fascination and curiosity. It's like, wow, just look at this. Look what my mind and body is doing. Because as soon as you look at it, you realize, well, it's not me. Like there's a part of me that's like watching this. So who's that part? Right? I'm not the thought that's like saying I'm a terrible person. I'm not that emotional.
Who's the I? Who's the me?
Right. And there's a liberation and a profound freedom, a peace that can come when we start asking that question in relationship to our suffering. Yeah. So I think just like getting comfortable being with our humanness in this way is the thing that starts to unhinge us from the suffering it's creating and gives us a little bit more freedom to access that space between stimulus and response and make some changes.
Two things I want to say is one, years ago, I worked with a young girl who had a lot of anxiety. And she described the anxiety as a tornado. And I'm a very visual person, so I love visuals as a way of helping us understand what we're experiencing or what we're feeling or what we're thinking. And part of what I did in the work with her was I said, look, I'm not here to deny the tornado. It's what's here. Yeah. And I asked her how it felt to be in the tornado. And, it was very scary. She was at the whim of wherever the tornado took her. And so when I said, I'm not here to deny or ignore or resist the tornado, let's just see if you can be the weatherman commentating on the tornado. Just step outside of it. Yeah. And being the weatherman on the tornado gave her the freedom to see it in a whole different way, which didn't have the same power over her.
Yes, that's beautiful.
And, that's what I love about mindfulness, because it gives us these frameworks that I like to give these visuals to that even really young kids can understand and use. Yes. And it's just, I just think that's so powerful. So what you were doing, in that languaging was you were just being the weatherman commentating on your pain. Yeah. It's those little visual cues or ways of shifting the relationship to experience can be really powerful. And that's a skillful thing you did in that moment in a coaching relationship, to be able to see like, oh, she's presenting this as a tornado, which has an image. And so what would be
something in relationship to that, and then bringing in the weather person.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and I also have to share, when we were on our retreat together, and that was a 7-day retreat, and we had a day and a half of silence, which when we were told we were entering into silence, I freaked out. That brought on a lot of anxiety to me. And I had this assumption that this silence was going to bring like years worth of healing of old wounds and pain. Like I just thought this was going to be like years worth of therapy. Like I had this attachment to the outcome. Like this is going to heal me. But what I was really trying to do is cover up how afraid I was to be silent.
Yeah.
And I was afraid of being lonely. And anyhow, what ended up happening was very much to your same description. I ended up in so much pain.
Yeah.
And what I would do, because as we alternated the sitting meditation and the walking meditation, I would walk in the adjacent building up and down a flight of stairs. Now, I don't recommend this for those at home. I was in deep practice. I would walk up and down the flight of stairs with my eyes closed. And I used my awareness with each step to stretch my body and to like be in my body. And I did it with my eyes closed so I could fully embody my body.
Yeah.
And use my senses and my each breath to literally know where the next step was up and down. And at the day and a half when the silence was over, I realized, oh man, I didn't have any like major life shaking awarenesses. And I was kind of bummed that I didn't have some major breakthrough. And then I was like, wait a second, my pain is gone.
Yeah.
I'm like, aha, there was my life shifting awareness. Was I was able to alleviate the pain through breath, through movement. And I remember literally sitting there and imagining the parts of like my shoulders were so tight just from sitting. It's weird how painful it is. And imagine just the muscles opening and my breath going in and my muscles just receiving this healing breath.
Yes.
And it was so simple and so subtle, but so powerful. When we shift our relationship to that pain, we can heal quite a bit. Yeah.
The silence, which can take form over a retreat or just in your meditation practice, silence, stillness, they serve as practices to promote a decompensation and all these different ways that we kind of armor ourselves or distract ourselves from ourselves. You could still do that in silence and stillness, but it's just harder. And then it starts to feel raw early on when you start meeting yourself in these parts of yourself, and that rawness is painful. But the healing awareness itself is inherently healing, and it's kind of like this metaphor gets used a lot, but like a caregiver holding a child and soothing them, or holding a wounded bird, like that touch, that holding is extremely comforting and settling and leads to an integration. And in addition to just like that breath coming in and healing, Carl Jung talked about these shadow parts that we have of ourselves, the parts of us that we cast into the shadows of awareness. That's just like the insecure part. I'm not going to acknowledge that. Just can't see you. And we live our whole lives, or can, where we just don't acknowledge these parts of ourselves at all. But it takes a lot of energy and effort to keep those parts suppressed. And so much of our emotional heaviness, anxiety, depression, that we can't like pinpoint anything in particular, is often coming from like having to drown and hold down parts of us that we're not willing to welcome in. And so the silence, the stillness can bring those parts back. But when we can start to meet them with that quality of awareness, that it allows for an integration that, like the pain that was coming from those parts now starts to subside. Yeah. And that's a really profound recognition and shift for people that it's in huge. The usual fast-paced form of personal development doesn't quite give space for some of that subtle working.
Yeah. And it does require the space to create it, because, and especially people they want the quick fix. Yep. They want to, I hear it so often of, mindfulness or meditation, that doesn't work for me.
Yeah.
And people are like, they have this assumption because they sat down in meditation once, they had a racing mind, and they think, that's not for me. I can't do that. It's like, well, you haven't been instructed on what it even means and how to do it. So I want to ask you, because I'm always fascinated. So a couple of questions. How do you define meditation? How do you define mindfulness?
Well, I'll first offer a way to compare and contrast them. You could think of mindfulness as like a form of like a fitness level, and meditation as like going to the gym. So a way to cultivate that fitness level.
Mm-hmm.
The thing with these words is that they're used in different contexts in different ways. So meditation,
and they're often used interchangeably inaccurately. So, and that
Totally.
I'm always looking for the ways to help people understand the difference, because they're not interchangeable. They're related.
Yeah. And a lot of it's just so much semantics that it's tough to say, but meditation technically just refers to a family of mental training practices. And within that could be visualization based practices, could be loving kindness, could be TM. So any sort of formal structured practice that you're cultivating a certain quality of mind, mindfulness included, but isn't exclusively mindfulness, in my opinion. And then mindfulness is this quality of awareness that there are a lot of different ways to describe it, but I kind of refer to it as like the practice of being with our experience rather than in our experience, in a way that's spacious, curious, and heartfelt. There's a lot of different elements to that we could go into, but in general, it is pointing to this quality of awareness that we can connect to. But it's not just awareness itself. Well, that's where this gets tricky.
Right. I'm curious your answer. Yeah.
Right. So in a secular context, it is more, mindfulness often gets used interchangeably with being present. And so then it's just like the awareness itself. But in more of a Buddhist context or traditional retreat setting context, mindfulness has a different intention. In addition to that, awareness is also a discerning quality to it. And you're using the awareness itself to sort of discern, is my relationship to this moment, or is what I'm experiencing in this moment wholesome or unwholesome? And you can kind of take that lens in relationship to thoughts, or in relationship to your relationship to thoughts.
Speak more to the wholesome piece of that.
Right. So again, in that context, and trouble with words is that people will define them in all different ways.
Right. They're going to have their own associations and their own meanings around it.
Right. In the Buddhist context, though, wholesome is more pointing to these three characteristics of, or what are often called poisons of mind: greed, hatred, and delusion. So greed, we often associate with money, but in that context, it's just like anything you want. You just want something, it's greed. You don't want something, hatred. You think that you're a separate entity from everyone else, delusion. So if the way we're relating to our experience is engaged in one of those kind of poisons of mind, greed, hatred, or delusion, that would be considered unwholesome. So the mindfulness is sort of like, in addition to just being aware, it's also tracking. Is this wholesome in that sense, or is it unwholesome? But for someone else, like, they might define wholesomeness differently, and it might just be like whatever aligned with their set of values. And so you can use mindfulness for that particular intention. I think for a lot of people starting out, self-care and self-love and self-compassion is like the biggest thing for so many people, especially growing up in the States. And so you can use your mindfulness practice not as just this like sterile awareness type practice, but as a way to see like, what is like the attitude of my mind in relationship to me? Like, do I have high expectations? Am I beating myself up for having thoughts?
Or is my inner critic taking over?
Totally.
Yeah.
And then like, what is the quality of mind I actually want to cultivate in relationship to myself? And so mindfulness can track that and help us like soften and make these little adjustments, rather than just this very sterile, like aware.
Well, and I think we can have awareness and then be like, okay, now what?
Yeah.
Because the awareness in and of itself is helpful, and yet there's still more that we do with it.
Yeah, totally.
And so I define meditation as creating space for stillness and silence.
I love
and allowing whatever's arising to exist without judgment. And then what I really say to people when I lead meditation is this is just practice.
Yeah.
I try to teach it in a way that people don't get scared of, because I think it's scary to a lot of people.
Yeah.
And when I say it's practice observing whatever's arising and choosing a different response pattern. Yeah. So that way, when we're off the cushion, so to speak, then we have something to draw upon.
Yeah.
And say, oh, wait, in meditation, I saw that thought and I didn't have to engage in it. So now that you're yelling at me, I can also choose not to engage in reactive behavior. I can have a different response pattern.
Yes.
And so the way that I've defined mindfulness over the years, because I really try to, having started teaching in schools to young kids and then doing a lot of mindful parenting work, and even after all my retreats that I did, I found it was a little esoteric and I needed some more practical application of it, because it was so esoteric in so many ways that I was like, okay, this all sounds great, but what do I do with this?
Mm-hmm.
How do I integrate this? So one of the ways that I have over the years cultivated this working definition is living with greater awareness, attention, and intention. And
like
so
that.
I'll say, okay, well, what are we being aware of, right? So it's awareness of whatever is arising in the moment, the thoughts, emotions, sensations, distractions, just awareness of what's arising, paying attention to our typical patterns of how we normally react to whatever's arising, our habits, our patterns, our mindsets, and then having intention in how we respond to them. To have the awareness of why am I doing what I'm doing? Because to me, the awareness is so powerful, because we're all just, people go through life not knowing why the hell they're doing what they're doing.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's how I've come to define what it means. And I think, everyone's going to have their own take on the definition of it. But I think, again, it's different doors into the same room.
Yes, totally.
And so you have done amazing things in your career, which I'm so proud of you of.
Thank you.
And, just continue to just wish you so much success. So I know one of the big things has been the Simple Habit app. So how did you get connected with that? And how did you get started?
Yeah. I had a friend that knew Yuna, the CEO of Simple Habit, the founder of Simple Habit, and connected me and Yuna back in, 2015, 2016. And
nice.
I had a conversation with her about what she was planning. And at the time, I had a lot of other stuff I was doing. And I was like, I don't know if I have time to take this on. It's a new app. Like most of the stuff fails. And my friend Kelly Boys, who recommended Yuna to me, said, no, trust her. She knows what she's doing. And I did. So I came on as one of their early teachers, and it has been the best way for me to get my work out there. I think the meditations have been heard on that app now about like 7.5 million times. And
that's amazing, Cory.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's just crazy.
It's amazing. And what a great ability to have such access to such a huge reach.
Yeah, I know. It's
and I've got 2 classes on there, and I love that they've expanded it to their therapy classes, these cool. kind of 5-minute on the go therapy sessions. And I've got one on patient parenting and one on titled Redefining Yourself. And it's a 7 series, like 5 or 7 minute per session. But I love the format, because I know when I first started in this practice, the whole idea of you have to meditate for 40 minutes a day to make your practice valid or to have it work. I just thought, I really respect these teachers. I think that's kind of bullshit all at the same time.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I know at the time, I was a busy stay-at-home mom, who then I went back for my hours to get licensed as a therapist. But I'm like, I don't have 40 minutes a day. So does that mean I can't do this?
Yeah.
That didn't seem right.
Right.
So I'm so glad that there's been so much more flexibility in the approach to help people meet themselves where they're at, so they can build up that muscle so they can sustain a longer practice and then see the benefit in a way that doesn't feel daunting. Yeah.
I had a lot of fear when I first signed up with them, and now I'm on a handful of apps, and a lot of them follow a similar model. But it was like the early stages of meditation apps coming out, and Simple Habit, the early branding was 5-minute meditations for busy people. And I just remember fearing like, well, what would my colleagues think if I'm supporting an app that is focused on 5-minute meditations? And my perspectives have changed so much since then, but there was like this really deep sense in the world that like practice needs to be long, and there's like a certain rigor to it. and like what's 5 minutes going to do. But
It does a lot.
I get messages every day from people around the world about what these 5-minute meditations are doing for them. And so I'm kind of just letting that be the guiding force right now.
Yeah.
So it can be really powerful.
It really can. I'm so glad that that is being a more well accepted viewpoint, because I think it allows so many more people access into a practice that we all need. And yet when there's such formal boundaries around the entry point, it really shut down a lot of people who really can benefit. So I'm so glad. How did you ever come up across, because I know I've had this a bit over the years, of that backlash of mindfulness? You know, I've seen the phrase so much, the McMindfulness, that we're trying to take this ancient Buddhist practice and just make it fit into our lives, and it's now cookie cutter, and, you know, people teaching it who aren't really qualified. And how have you dealt with that? And especially, I mean, having delved really deep into a 6 month Vipassana retreat where you were really delving into the tools, so you're holding that in really deep, high integrity.
Yeah.
How has that shown up for you?
Yeah, I'm very much at the intersection of that conversation, right? The more purist Buddhists or meditation teachers that have an idea of how it should be done, and then more the secular world, which is more where I started and more where I hang out. And I value both tremendously, and I'm always integrating. I think the beauty about, there's a way to talk about mindfulness, and people will push back on this, and maybe not everyone does this, but I have not felt limited in what I can explore and the depth of what I can do teaching secular mindfulness. In fact, I can reach more people, and I can, in my opinion, go deeper with those people by basically just translating the depth of whatever I was doing in Burma into language that a person understands. And so all of even just qualities related to like what enlightenment actually is, I get such a thrill out of being able to talk about that in a way that's relatable for people. So I haven't felt limited in any of it. I'm very much involved in the conversations, any pushback that comes up, I just listen, and because I want to hear those perspectives and the people that feel like it's not good to be doing, like it was so strange for me early on. I was like, this thing that like changed my life and is changing so many people's lives, you're saying it's wrong to do that. Like, so I wanted to hear them out.
Yeah. Well, and to hold space with curiosity around it, right? Because that would be the mindful response to that.
Yeah. And sometimes my response doesn't feel like the mindful one, but this is one that I just continue to lean into. And any article that comes up, and even that guy that wrote McMindfulness, Ron Purser, I forget his name, reading through his stuff to see, and they have valid points, but it all just depends on the lens through which you're looking at it, and like the kind of purity you hold for how this stuff should be disseminated. I always come back to the Buddha wasn't a Buddhist, and I know that gets thrown around loosely, so I don't want to just like say that that's my defense, but this started with a guy that was just curious about suffering and happiness, and developed a way to investigate his mind to understand that. And I don't think the Buddhists own mindfulness, and we do have to recognize its role, I think, in the larger context of Buddhism, which has a more explicit ethical element. And I do think there's something to be said for bringing that more into secular mindfulness. But I also think there's a lot to be said for how secular mindfulness is blending more with modern therapy in a way that in spiritual Buddhist contexts, they have a lot to learn from even Western psychotherapy, especially when it comes to trauma. There's a ton of spiritual bypassing happening in those communities. So it's not like they're complete.
Yeah. Well, as a therapist, mindfulness is a framework from which I work with my clients. And, I'll often say, jokingly, but not so much, whether you're sitting in traffic or dealing with cancer, the tools are the same.
Yeah.
The tools are the same. And what I find so much of people who come into my office is people who've gone to therapy for years and are still stuck.
Yeah.
And they, we could process the hell out of anyone's past, but
Yeah.
we all want to move past it and get forward.
Yeah.
And I really feel that mindfulness is that answer to do it, because whenever that past comes up, we can hold it in a different container.
Mm-hmm.
And we have this set of tools to draw upon to say, okay, now what do I want to do with this?
Yeah. Yes.
And so to me, it's a very tool-driven practice, because we can just keep building up our toolbox of, okay, so if we can't access our breath, let's ground into our body. We can't ground into our body, let's ground into our senses. Okay, you're getting triggered, let's tune into gratitude. All right, you're getting that inner critic is piping up again, let's go back to self-compassion.
Yeah.
You're angry at your ex, let's turn to loving kindness. Like, there's always a response if we don't forget that it's available to get to, right?
Totally.
I mean, I just led a retreat 2 weeks ago on self-compassion. And I see this as, especially for women, one of the areas that women most get stuck. Like, we're so busy taking care of everyone else, we just put ourselves last.
Right.
And, to me, it all comes back to mindfulness.
Yeah.
So tell me about your book.
Yeah.
I just cut you off, but I want to hear about your book.
That's okay. Yeah. The book is my baby. It's what I've been working on the last almost 2 years now. It's called Stop Missing Your Life, How to Be Deeply Present in an Unpresent World. That's not the initial title I wanted to call it, although I'm growing to appreciate it quite a bit, as I think that title, Stop Missing Your Life, like, really speaks to the zeitgeist right now, this cultural, the flavor of our culture right now. Like,
it's visceral. You can feel it.
Yes, exactly.
What did you want to call it?
I wanted to call it Deep Presence, but everyone said that sounded like an 80s porno. And then I wanted to call it Permission to Be Human, which I got a little better feedback, but still wasn't, you need something that stands off the shelves in the airport.
Well, and you also, I love the airport bookstores. They're the best.
Yeah, I know. They're fun. And so Stop Missing Your Life while you're in the airport, really.
Right. As you're running to the plane.
Yes.
Right. But I think also it speaks to the issue people are lying awake thinking about at night.
Yes.
So
in different ways.
Naming their problem without them realizing, I didn't even realize I was having a problem, but you just named it for me, and now you're going to offer the solution? Wow, right. Thank you. I'm going to buy your book.
Right. Yeah. Marketing 101.
Yeah.
And people have different experiences of what missing their life is to them. For some people, it's just like, I literally can't pay attention. My mind is so scattered that I'm not here at all. For others, it might be like, I've had significant trauma and it's just created this fear response in my nervous system. And I feel like I'm constantly living in fear and missing my life for that reason. For others, like more like me, I can get very consumed with future orientation of like things I'm excited about in a positive way. And there's this fine line between like feeling the motivation toward getting to that place and actually like appreciating the cliche, like appreciating the journey along the way. And so I have to catch myself because, and with the negative stuff as well, like writing the book was really difficult. And many times throughout that, there was this sense of like, well, once this is done, then I can relax. Then I'll go into like the promotion.
Then I'll be happy.
Then I'll be happy, right? And like, I know this, but it's just like, it's really deep conditioning in the brain. And now that it's done, it's like, oh, now the promotional period, and it comes out. Like once that's done, then I could start running retreats again. And I know it's gonna keep going like that. So the book is really it's a book about becoming more whole and integrated. And the Stop Missing Your Life is not just pointing to this very basic, like head down and our phones. Like that's one element of it for sure, but it's all the ways that we're not fully accessing the many parts of who we are, the many parts of what it means to be human. The way we compartmentalize, shut down in order to get to the next thing or accomplish the next goal.
Yeah.
The way we're like often leaning into the next moment, away from discomfort or toward something that we think is going to give us the refuge. And deep fulfillment is not something we chase. It's something we learn to settle into and relax into. And the book it's a really a retreat into the depth of what that can look like.
I can't wait to read it. I'm super excited.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
I'm excited.
And I think we all have a story, like you said, of realizing I'm missing something.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like for me, that I woke up in my early 30s one day and was like, how did I get here? Like I didn't remember making the conscious choice to get to where I was. And yet I was exactly where I wanted to be, which was the irony.
Yeah, right.
Like I completely crafted my life and yet it wasn't right.
Yes.
But I had everything I crafted.
Yes. And that's, thank you for saying that, because that is an important thing that gets heavily overlooked in the life design movement right now, which is important. And there's a lot of goodness and well-being that comes from crafting your life and moving in that direction. But the thing that gets overlooked is that the bigger thing, other than the external circumstances that's influencing your well-being, is your neuroses. And with the life design thing, what can often happen is we're just fueling the neuroses that say, once I get there, then I'll be happy. And then we actually get there, but we still have the same neuroses that are running that pattern. And if we haven't trained those to actually meet this moment as it is and actually relax into it and settle into it and find peace in it, we're just going to play out that pattern till the day we die. And we might get a little bit more well-being because the moment gets manufactured better, but that's where the work happens. And that's often the real journey.
And that, to me, what mindfulness gave me was that ability to get out of my head and into my body and out of those expectations and those shoulds. And for me, that looked like having the courage to say, I don't want to be married anymore to the person I was with since I was 13.
Yes.
And had 2 children with, a beautiful home, 3 vacations a year, like the perfect life.
Yes.
But I wasn't fulfilled. Like my soul wasn't fulfilled. And so to have the courage to trust my soul's calling, not knowing where it was taking me, where it was going, what it was all about, what I was giving up, but trusting I'm in alignment and that's got to be the right answer.
Yeah. Yes.
So I don't know.
Beautiful.
I just felt the need to share that because I think, we all miss out on something until we wake up one day. And I think some people at some point say, oh, I'm missing it out, but I don't want to do the work to figure it out. So I'll just keep on missing out. Totally. And I guess on some level, that's a conscious choice too.
Yes. And again, thank you for saying that too. Sometimes we just got to play out these patterns and give our system the space to play it out. And it might be years like that before things come together in a way and we're ready. And, that's just all part of the journey. Yeah.
So Cory, how can people best find you? I know we'll have your links in the show notes, but if they're listening and be like, okay, I want to listen to more, like what's the best way to connect?
Yeah. Well, I have a way for people to get a bunch of free resources, and just have all my contact info. If people text your email address to the number 631-405-4631. There'll be an automated email that goes to your inbox with meditations, book recommendations, app recommendations, and all the links to follow along. So it's 631-405-4631.
At first, I was thinking you were like naming your Les Mis, Jean Valjean, prison code number.
I know the cadence did sound like that. It's also not my personal phone number, so
don't call you.
Yeah. But I also have a podcast, a daily podcast called Practicing Human, which is short snippets each day around these topics. And you follow along on Instagram is where I post most of my stuff, and Facebook at Cory Muscara. And the book is Stop Missing Your Life. You can find it in all bookstores and stopmissingyourlife.com.
Cory, thank you so much. It is so good to see you again.
Likewise. Yeah, Jory.
And I hope to continue having our journeys unfold and hope to cross paths in person one day again soon.
Me too.
I'll remember you this time, I promise.
Good. You're doing great work.
Thank you. All right, Cory, thanks for coming on.
To continue your journey forward, find Jory Rose on Facebook and Instagram to become part of her growing community. You can also gain access to her meditations, books, online classes, or to sign up for an upcoming retreat, visit her at joryrose.com. That's JOREEROSE.com.